Yay. Good to see you all. Let's begin with trying to set a motivation with prayers by remembering the meaning of the prayers, thinking of the meaning. Sangye churang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen ki pe sognam ki rola penjir sangye drupa shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma and contemplating and meditating. The word Chernyen, Nyenpa can also mean that whole triad, listening, contemplating, meditating. Through those collections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soki chognam la jangshu baru dagni kapsuchi dagi chunen gi pesognam gi drola penchir sangye rupajo saji poki chukshig meto tram rirab lingjin meet nide yenpadi sangye shingdu mikte uagi droku namdak shingla chubasho Jesun Lama Dampa Kenam Ki Chukukala Kien Se Chuzinde Jitar Sampe Dulje Zin Mala Sabge Chuki Charpa Abdu so idam guru rana mandala kam nirya tayami. So there should be a correction in that prayer. It says to the Lama, it should be lamas because there's a plural indicator in that line, which says, could you put it back, Luis? Anyway. Jesu Lama, Dampa, K Nam Ki. So the Nam after the K is a plural indicator, means there's a plurality of yous. O holy and perfect pure Lamas, Jesu Lama. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you for that. So we're going to begin with a little physical meditation. Get yourself centered right. What do we have is coming here? Ron is off camera. Rachel is here. Karen has arrived. Okay. Okay, sit comfortably. Your spine erect. Relax your mind. Place your attention on the respiration, just watching it without controlling it. Just the same that as if you were to watch your heartbeat. There's no way of controlling that easily. Some people may. And once you've recognized the respiration, keep your mindfulness on it. Hold it with mindfulness to the exclusion of other thoughts. Then bring your attention to the more subtle object, the mental consciousness. It might help to imagine withdrawing your senses, the winds that support the eye, ear, nose, taste, and tactile consciousness. Imagine those withdrawing to the heart chakra. You hunker down in the little cave there, looking at the nature of the mind, its contents. What that means is you can know the mind's general characteristics, that which is clear and knowing, by observing the contents. You know the contents, you know the different thoughts, objects, appearances. And that mind is also clear here in this sense, in the conventional sense. It is clear light in the sense of not providing any obstruction, any hindrance to the arisal of mental events, mental thoughts, and it doesn't prevent their reabsorbing into the mind. Focusing on that, our conventional Buddha nature, developmental Buddha nature, whatever problems we have, whatever frustrations we have with our body or mind, they can all be overcome. Mainly, the mind is the main thing. As the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha said, this auspicious moment that we have right now, a life of leisure and endowment, comes but once and is difficult to attain again. It means it comes once in a long, long time. It's almost it's like winning the lottery. And it is difficult to find again because the causes of the karmic causes and the subsidiary causes are difficult for sentient beings to know about and to do. We have to create virtuous karma, predominantly for perfect human rebirth through giving and the practice of ethics that will allow us to be born in the upper realms, giving that we will have the resources necessary to practice without hindrance. Also, the rest of the six perfections, along with prayer, it's very difficult for sentient beings to create the karma to be reborn as a human, let alone with all of these facets of being born at a time when the Buddha taught, turned the wheel of Dharma, those teachings still exist, and so forth. So I think I'm going to try to use this opportunity that is so rare to extract its greatest essence. And the Buddha said also that his intelligent followers should not be satisfied with his lesser vehicle teachings, although they will give you the opportunity to achieve nirvana for oneself, those teachings alone, without bodhicitta, without a special mind that aims to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, far more virtuous mind than the mind of renunciation that wants to leave cyclic existence and sees all of the samsaric pleasures as of the nature of suffering. Without that bodhicitta, the lesser vehicle teachings can't take you to enlightenment. They can take you definitely to nirvana. So think, taking the Buddha's advice in this special opportunity that I have, this auspicious moment, to develop bodhicitta, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. We focus particularly on all living beings as having been our mother sometime in the past. Every single sentient being, whether they be friend, enemy, or stranger, or even our present mother, they've all been our mothers sometime in the past. And not just once or a handful of times, through beginningless lives, every sentient being has been our mother numberless times. And as kind, maybe kinder than our present mother. All of them are wandering within cyclic existence without a refuge protector, striving for more wealth, more crypto, whatever, more pleasures, more power, more humiliation of our enemies. Those poor mothers we once looked at with joy and anticipation and kindness, the sense that they would protect us. They now have fallen into this depravity. In order to extricate them from that, it's not sufficient to have some Western psychological methods or to incarcerate them and teach them a lesson or something. One needs to have the skill and means of a Buddha, omniscient mind, that knows the paths that they will have to take in order to achieve enlightenment. So we must achieve enlightenment for their sake to be able to do that, in order to lead them out of cyclic existence. To achieve enlightenment, I have to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which are not obvious to me. Maybe a little bit about merit. He is known even in the Western biblical tradition, ye reap what ye sow, talking about karma. But the collection of wisdom is quite hidden to ordinary beings. And those two collections are explained in Buddhist teachings, the sutras, in Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom, one of his main texts on emptiness, and in Chandrakirti's commentary to that, meaning commentary called Madhyamakavatara, and Chandrakirti's own commentary to those verses, the Bhashyam. Lama Tsongkhapa's text, written hundreds of years later, Gompa Rapsal, tried to elucidate Chandrakirti's thought for the Tibetans. Even at that time, the Tibetans might have difficulty misinterpreting Chandrakirti. And now, as even Lama Tsongkhapa's words could be misinterpreted, we're having our own class studying that translation, trying to get to the bottom of it. Think I'm going to participate. I'm going to listen. Means actively try to put the words together. I'm going to contemplate on the meaning of those words. And when certainty arises as to the meaning, try to hold my mind for some moments on that meaning to develop the wisdom of meditation. I'm going to participate in the class today in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all mother sentient beings. Okay. Good to see you. So, hi, Karen and David. You've also arrived. Don is here. Stephen. So, how are we doing? Any observations about our meditation or any questions you would like to ask before we begin class? Don has something. No? Your mouth was, I thought you were, okay. No question, okay. Jeremy, how about you? You're sort of a new participant. Anything that you've been itching to ask or clear up?
I've had many questions, George, but I'll hold on to them for now. I don't want to take up too much time. They're about the passage that we were reading from Thurman on the three principal reasonings.
Right.
I'll just hold them for now. I think we might cover them
So
later.
On Monday, we'll go over that those two documents, the one from Thurman and the one from Hopkins. If you have the mental space, they're translations of the same Tibetan passage in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, like She Ningpo. So Thurman translated it originally many years ago, decent translation, and Hopkins translated it probably after, but I'm not absolutely sure. Do you know, Paul, when?
Thurman translated in the late 70s, early 80s, and Hopkins translated in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. So Hopkins, although his manuscript one part of his translation is available for the first part of Lekshe Ningpo, but this part is unpublished, but we have access to it. So you can compare the two if your mind has space. Read Thurman, and then try to see if Hopkins maybe clarifies what Thurman is trying to say. Hopefully they're laid out in a way that you can find that. Okay, good. So we'll talk about that on Monday in our discussion group. I missed last Monday discussion group. I had a appointment with a therapist. Not a I probably could use a mental therapist, a chiropractor therapist. Okay. So yeah. So I wanted to mention in Lama Chopa, the Guru Puja, that some of you will do twice a month. Some of you, I don't know if any of you do every day. I do. I try to do every day. Over the years, I've missed a couple of days. In there are two verses that begin with the same syllables. Chunam Rangshin. Does anyone know the Tibetan well enough to know what those verses are? Or you all recite them in English? Paul, do you know? So at the beginning, just after the visualization of the tree of assembled gurus, one has a verse about inviting the actual wisdom beings to come and inhabit your visualization. And the line after that says, Chunam Rangshin Droong Kundalyang. So Chunam Rangshin means the nature of all phenomena, and what is it? Droong. Droa means to go. Ong means to come. So Kundelyang. Kun means all, and del means devoid of. So the nature of all phenomena are devoid of coming and going. You can see that verse, and there are 3 more lines to that. Later on in the 7-limb puja, there's another place in rejoicing. It starts out Chunam Rangshin also. So I often get mixed up. I say the wrong stanza at the wrong time. Chunam Rangshin Sema Dangdelyang. So the nature of all phenomena are devoid of characteristics, or devoid of any intrinsic characteristics. So the next time you're reciting Lama Chopa, keep an eye open for that, because we're studying about that now, that all phenomena lack any inherent existence, any intrinsic identity like that. Okay, so we are meant to begin today on Jinpa's, in Jinpa's written text 262, if my eyes are not deceiving me, and in the FPMT translation, the equivalent of page 145. Okay, so this particular section begins, "This then is also the intended meaning of the statement that all phenomena are empty of their own essence. Therefore, it is totally incorrect to assert that a vase, or pot, being empty of true existence, but not being empty of itself, constitutes shentong, or extrinsic emptiness, and that the vase being empty of the vase itself constitutes rangtong, or intrinsic emptiness." So I'd read that last time. Maybe we talked a little bit about it. But I wanted to just to go back over these, the quotations earlier, just before that, from the 400 stanzas. You can see just like maybe just a couple paragraphs above that, there are 2 quotations, one from the 400 stanzas, one from Fundamental Wisdom. And even, yeah, so just before the 400 stanzas, it says, "This sutra also rejects the assertion of the Chittamatra school that dependent nature is not empty of existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristics, but is empty in the sense of being devoid of a substantial duality of subject and object." So what sutra is that talking about? It's talking about the heap of jewels sutra, the Ratnakutta, from the Kashyapya, the chapter requested by Kashyapya, which is not yet translated in the 84,000 translation project. But it says that the translation that Lama Tsongkhapa quoted here from Chandrakirti says, Kashyapya, this is Buddha talking to Kashyapya, "Furthermore, the middle path, perfectly discerning reality, does not make phenomena empty." Or as Jinpa says, does not make phenomena to be empty. Phenomena are themselves empty. So that was one of the translations we went over in a little bit of detail. So here, just before the 400 stanzas quotation, it says, "This sutra," so the Ratnakutta Sutra citation, "also rejects the assertion of the Chittamatra school." So it's sort of like double purpose. It's not only talking about just the Prasangika view, but it's talking about refuting the Chittamatra school. So with regard to this, let me read a little of what Geshe Zopa said. Let's see if I might better wear reading glasses and put this closer. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So in July 2002, Geshe-la, during the summer course in this section, Geshe-la said, this sutra, actually, in reality, is refuting the Yogacharans, who are also called the Namrikpa. What is that, Namrikpa? Paul, do you know?
It's the Vijnanavadins. That's cognition only. Namrik Vijnana.
Yeah. So Namrikpa would be Vijnaptika, I guess Geshe-la was saying. Maybe that's wrong. Vijnaptika. So Vijnap. So Namrik is what?
I think it's Vijnana or Vijñapti.
Yeah, Vijnana is the operative words here. It's another synonym of knowing. Or a synonym of sem. So when we say sem sampa or chitta matra, only mind, the Vijnapta followers also are only, they believe only Vijnapta is existing like that. So he says, Geshe-la said, this sutra in reality is actually refuting the Yogacharans, the Namrikpa. Chu tamche nampa rikpa sam. So the sam is the mirror. Namrik means sem, mind or consciousness. Everything is mere mind or mere cognition. These schools, those kinds of systems, say that all dependent nature. So when we talk about the Chittamatra, they introduce what are called the three natures. All the dependent nature, that means the things that we see that arise from causes and conditions, are established by way of their own character. So they accept them as being inherently existent. They are truly established and truly existent for the Chittamatra. All the conventional phenomena, all the dependent arisings. The Yogacharans accept mind, object, products, and cause and effect as real, inherently existing. Therefore, for them, dependent nature is not empty of inherent existence. Right? Dependent nature is not empty of inherent existence. These phenomena are empty. What are they empty of? Rachel, what do you think? The dependent nature for Chittamatra.
Is it they're empty of existing apart from mind?
Yeah, in short, they're empty of there being an object and the object apprehending consciousness being different substances. Yeah, in other words, all the things that we see are not other than the very nature of the mind that's apprehending them. They both, the mind that's apprehending them and they themselves, their appearance, arise from the same seed in the mind. So therefore, for the Chittamatras, dependent nature is not empty of inherent existence. All of these things that are appearing do truly exist, do inherently exist. But dependent nature is empty of apprehended and apprehender being dual. That's just restating what I just said. They are empty of dual nature of object and subject being different substances. They don't believe that subject and object are different substances. They believe they're the same substance. Everything is the nature of apprehension. Apprehension means mind. Every object is the nature of the mind. So therefore, every object is not a different entity or a different nature, substantially different nature than the apprehension or the mind. So that emptiness is called the emptiness of duality. So they do accept that. They don't accept that the dependent phenomena are empty of inherent existence or empty of true existence. They say, no, they are truly existent. They are inherently existent, but they are still empty in another sense, in this Chittamatra sense of emptiness. Okay. So this sutra also rejects the assertion of the Chittamatra school that dependent nature is not empty of existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristic. What does that mean? What does that mean, Stephen?
Could I have you repeat the question, Venerable George?
Yes. The text, the Chimba's translation says, this sutra, which is talking about the quotation from the Kashapya, this sutra also rejects the assertion of the Chittamatra school that dependent nature, or who could say dependent natures, are not empty of existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristic.
Well, it's saying that they are therefore inherently existent, the dependent natures, those that arise from causes and conditions.
So they are not empty. This is kind of like a double negative, right? So they are not empty of existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristics. They do intrinsically exist, in other words, but they are empty in the sense of being devoid of substantial duality of subject and object. Then it goes on to quote, we read last time, a stanza from the 400 stanzas. Jimpa's translation, okay, it's okay. It's not that what is not empty is seen as empty if one harbors the thought, may nirvana be mine. One cannot attain nirvana through such a false view, so taught the Tathagata, or as Ruth Sonam translated in her translation, along with Geshe Sonam Rinchen, one does not regard that which is not empty as empty, thinking thereby to gain nirvana. Tathagatas say that nirvana will not be attained through wrong views. Okay, so what can we take away from that? You can't achieve nirvana with a wrong view, and it's talking about somehow about what is not empty. One does not regard that which is not empty as empty. So this is, even in Geshe Sonam Rinchen's translation of Gyaltsabje's commentary. So the 400 stanzas was written by Aryadeva, right? Chandrakirti wrote a commentary to that. And then, like Lama Tsongkhapa writing commentaries to Chandrakirti, Gyaltsabje also wrote a commentary to Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas. So this was written by Gyaltsabje. In that, it doesn't appear to be talking anything about the Chittamatra, but when Geshe Zopa taught in July 24th in 2002, he was referring to the stanza that begins Tongmin Tongden Tongmin Te. So there's two negatives in there. Tongmin, that which is not empty. Tongden means having emptiness. Tongmin Te, so is not seen. So Geshe said Tongmin probably means not empty of existing from their own side. Not empty of existing from their own side. So not that which is not empty. Rangingo Drupa Tongpa Minpa. So Geshe said that earlier we talked about the Yogacaras, the Vijnaptis here, that things truly exist, inherently exist. They are not empty of existing their own way. That's the beginning of the sentence, Tongpa Min. which is not, in Geshe Sonam's translation, that which is not empty. They are not empty of existing in their own way. That which possesses empty, Tongden, probably means this empty of apprehended and apprehender being different substances, which in Tibetan we say zungzin zetadegi tongba, empty of there being a different substances of the apprehender and the apprehended. What is possessing tongpa minte means, oh yeah, maybe this is too complicated. Okay, anyway, I just wanted to read a little so you can interpret this, as Geshe said. Usually when this is taught in the, when one is receiving peti, that means teachings on the pecha. So the pecha in question would be Kompa Rapso. So at this point, the Geshes would explain the lineage view of what Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about here when he's quoting the 400 stanzas. So he's quoting it in such a way that it's not the usual interpretation of just general emptiness, but it's actually a refutation of the Chittamatra. Don, you have a question.
Thank you, Venerable. Yeah, I have a question about the statement being devoid of substantial duality, as if there's a gradient of duality, and I don't understand the use of the word substantial there.
Well, it's talking about them being different substances, the consciousness and the object that it apprehends. Let's say my eye consciousness and the trees outside seem to be different substances. They have their own substantial continuity, right? My consciousness can't become the tree. The tree can't become my consciousness. But they appear to be different substances, but the Chittamatra say they are actually the same substance that arises from this seed in the consciousness, in the alaya vijnana, in the storehouse consciousness. They both arise together, so they are devoid of being different substances. Does that clarify that a little?
I still don't quite understand why the word substantial is there as opposed to just duality.
Well, substance, rather than saying substantial, they are devoid of being different substances. That means they are the same substance. They arise, generally we would say, other than Chittamatra and the Yogacara Svatantrikas maybe that follow some Chittamatra, we would say that, yeah, the consciousness and these objects are different substances. Do you know what I mean by substances? They have their own continuity, like there is a substance of the mental consciousness. You want to say something, go on, say. That continuity continues, one instant of consciousness giving rise to the next instance of consciousness. That forms a continuum. That's a substance. And the object that it apprehends, let's say if we're talking about eye consciousness, the object that it apprehends, maybe the wasps that are at my window or the trees outside, they seem to be different substances, a different substance than the substance of the eye consciousness. So when where it's translated about substantially different, you can just translate it a different way. They're devoid of being different substances. Okay, think about that. Yeah. Is that clear?
Well, yes, thank you. Devoid works better for my mind, apparently. So
Yeah. Just sometimes changing a word. Sean, what do you think?
Well, my thought is, if you talk about what's actually appearing to the mind, is that appearance different than the mind because it's happening within the mind?
Is that appearance different than the mind?
Like not the object itself, but the appearance of the object.
To the mental consciousness. Here we were talking about the sense consciousness, right? So for the mental consciousness, Yeah. Another question. So what are you saying?
Well, because that's what I think they're talking about is you, I mean, what's appearing out, the external thing that we're creating an appearance in our mind from appears differently to all sorts of beings. So it's like we can't be sure of what the external object even is.
I think
All we can know is from the appearance from within our own minds.
that's a very courageous statement to make, refuting all of the great pundits in the past who interpreted Chittamatra as meaning there's a difference in the, among all of the consciousness, but in particular the sense consciousness. You're saying that it doesn't refer to the sense consciousness as it refers to the mental consciousness alone. Is that what you're saying? That's a very courageous.
I mean, then would it be different in that aspect?
Joking. Yeah, so it refers to all of the consciousnesses. Let's say an I consciousness. That's not a mental consciousness, right? Eventually, the mental consciousness will know what the I consciousness is seeing. Eventually, one thought instant after you see something. But we're just talking about the I consciousness. It appears that the I consciousness, its continuity, its substance, is different than the substance of that which it sees. The mug, the trees, the cars, samsara, all of those seem to be different substances, but they all arise from one seed in the storehouse consciousness, some karmic seed that allowed you to see this particular thing and for it to appear to be a different substance from the consciousness. But the consciousness that's apprehending it and the object itself are actually the same substance.
Would the consciousness that's apprehending that object not be part of the mind itself, is what I'm asking. It is, isn't it?
Say that again?
The consciousness that's apprehending that object, once it's apprehended by that consciousness, that's within the mind. So then you can't separate it.
That last sentence, that's what's what?
That's at that point, is it not what they're talking about where there's, at that point, there wouldn't be a substantial duality because it's part of consciousness.
Yeah, that's what the Chittamatra believe. There's no substantial difference between them. They are the same substance. The consciousness that apprehends.
But you're talking about the object is different from the consciousness. That's
the substance of the.
I'm saying once the consciousness has apprehended that object, is that substantially different from this mind that starts to play with it after that?
Okay, we're not talking about the mind that plays with it after that. We're talking about just the here.
But a mental consciousness is part of mind.
We're not talking about mental consciousness yet. Just giving an example with the sense consciousnesses. Okay, giving an example. So the fact that it's not as though there is a sequence for Chittamatra that the object appears outside, and then we turn our attention to it, and then we apprehend it. They both arise together, temporally and from the same substance. The consciousness that's apprehending a tree and the tree itself, they're simultaneous. Anyway, okay, so there's a lot about Chittamatra that we have to review a little bit. Let me go on a little bit more. Okay, is that enough just to hold you off, Sean? Or are you
sure?
completely frustrated?
I mean, I don't want to get us derailed, so yeah, keep going.
Okay, so let's go a little bit further. So this stanza from the 400 stanzas. It is not that what is empty is seen as empty. If one harbors the thought, may nirvana be mine, one cannot attain nirvana through such a false view, so the Tathagata taught. So Geshe-la said that actually this is being quoted by Lama Tsongkhapa because when Aryadeva wrote it, irregardless of what Gyaltsab Je's commentary is just talking about one aspect of that, when Aryadeva wrote it, he had a dual purpose in mind. It's talking about this simple kind of meaning, and also as a criticism of the Chittamatra. But as I said, that to understand that well, we'd have to go into a bit more detail. So we can do that on Monday if you're interested. So that is meant here also to be a critique of the Chittamatra school, that they would see dependent phenomena as empty of being different substances, and thinking that may nirvana be mine, because the Chittamatra, for the Chittamatra school, they believe that there are, well, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, I think there are different subsets of Chittamatra, but some of them say that there are three final vehicles, right? Like the lower Hinayana schools. So that means you could achieve nirvana as a hearer or a solitary realizer. Those would be two vehicles. And one final, and also the vehicle of the Bodhisattvas. There's some people who just attain nirvana and never achieve enlightenment. So if one harbors the thought, may nirvana be mine, one cannot attain nirvana through such a false view. So that's that we can talk about on Monday. So it's meant to be also a critique of the Chittamatra. Then in Sawishara, Fundamental Wisdom, the text by Nagarjuna, also is being quoted here. And if you are interested, that is in chapter 13, verse 8, I think. Yeah. So here he says, the conqueror has stated that emptiness eliminates all views. It means all wrong views, or Chim says metaphysical views. So he who views emptiness as real, or just the text says, he who views emptiness, that means that they're apprehending it as truly existent or inherently existent. This the Buddha called incurable. So here, this is the word that we talked about last time. Tera juptum mepar sung. Juptum mepa is looks like just means cannot be attained. Like the FPMT said, oh no, they translated it also according to Jimpa, incurable. So what does this mean? The view of emptiness, correctly understanding emptiness, is an incredibly powerful panacea that eliminates, that can abandon all wrong views, that phenomena are inherently existent, truly existent, or in other kinds of wrong views. But if one were to consider emptiness itself to be truly existent, that person would be using this incredible weapon in such a way that will never get them to the goal. They are incurable. They can't achieve their goal, right? What do you think, Stephen? Is that making sense?
Well, I'm just looking at another translation of that verse. Yes, it is, Venerable George.
Which verse, which translation are you looking at?
Well, this is the Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. It's Garfield's translation.
Okay, how did he translate?
And I think this turns on the last line, but he says the victorious ones have said that emptiness is the relinquishing of all views. For whomever emptiness is a view, that one will accomplish nothing. And I think Paul pointed out that incurable or incorrigible was like a secondary translation last week. And then It seemed to me that the discussion was around accomplishment rather than incurable or incorrigible.
Right. So that's a interesting translation too. So that gives another kind of taste of that.
Yeah, I can, Stephen, I assume you're taking that from the published book that's the root verses, right? The middle way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jay ended up retranslating that in Ocean of Reasoning because he did that on his own, and then he sat down with Geshe Samten and retranslated it. So the translation is actually different if you read Ocean of Reasoning. Or Ocean, yeah.
You have the Ocean of Reasoning translation?
Yeah. I noticed that.
What
And
was-
that's there they use the word incorrigible, I think.
Yeah, yeah. But Jay kind of repudiated that initial
Oh,
translation.
okay. Thanks for correcting me, Paul.
No worries.
Okay. Okay. So now we're left with this new section. This then is also the intended meaning of the statement. So this follows the quotation from the fundamental wisdom that we just read. This then is also the intended meaning of the statement that all phenomena are empty of their own essence. Therefore, it is totally incorrect to assert that a vase, being empty of true existence, but not being empty of itself, constitutes extrinsic emptiness, shentong, and that the vase being empty of the vase itself constitutes intrinsic emptiness. Okay, wow, that sounds complicated. KT, can you unravel that for us? What is this what is this, just the words, what are they meaning here?
I think the first part is talking about this Svantantrika view. Is that correct? Like where the extrinsic emptiness, we still have that's the other emptiness, but there's still something left, which is intrinsic.
So I don't think
I'm not sure.
Svantantrika in general is called, Harold's Shentong.
Okay.
The
I'm
Shentong-
concerned the true empty or the true existence versus the intrinsic existence. But maybe I'm on the wrong track with that.
So this is the intended meaning of the statement that all phenomena are empty of their own essence. Let's see how Venerable Joan translated this. She said, this then is also the intended meaning of the statement that all phenomena are empty of their own entity. Oh, maybe she just used almost the same as Jimpa, just changing a word or two. Therefore, it is not at all suitable to say that pot not being empty of pot, but being empty of true existence is the emptiness of other. Pot empty of pot is the emptiness of self. That's how she translated it. Does that seem more clear? Who's following this? Anna, are you following this? You're looking at the screen. I'm not sure what if you're reading the text.
Just read Jones, and I actually found it a little clearer.
It seems like it's making a different point there, right? Therefore, it is not at all suitable to say that a pot not being empty of pot so this is an incorrect statement to say that a pot not being empty of pot itself. What does that mean? Pot being empty of pot. Shankar, do you know?
Is it? I'm sorry. There's a dog barking behind me.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you should ask someone else.
Okay. Nadine, what do you think?
The understanding that the pot is empty of pot is a wrong understanding. It would mean that there is no pot. There's a pot to be found.
It is not suitable to say pot not being empty of pot. So pot being empty of pot, from what you say would be wrong, they're saying that's not right. So a pot not being empty of pot, a lot of double negatives, that would seem to be right, right? Pot not being empty of pot, but being empty of true existence, that's so far that much would be okay. Is the emptiness of other. They would say, someone is seeming to be saying that for a pot to be empty of pot would be the wrong tone. So, misinterpreting what wrong tone means, and shentong meaning here, it is empty of true existence. Pot being empty of pot is the emptiness of self, or is the self-emptiness, is the wrong tone. So this is a little bit subtle. What do you think? Who's following this? Whereas, Karen, are you following this? It's a little bit complicated.
Yeah, maybe. I guess I understand that pot is empty of pot. I just find the language confusing.
Oh, there's two different ways to be interpreted. So one
Okay.
way would mean pot is empty of pot, meaning that a pot is not a pot. That's absurd. That's a wrong way of understanding it. Pot being empty of pot, meaning a pot or a vase is empty of its own entity. That is not just a pot is empty of a pot's intrinsic identity. It is not inherently existent, in other words. A pot's own entity. That's what's meant in when we talk about rangtong. What is the correct interpretation of self-emptiness or intrinsic emptiness, as Jimpa translates? That means something is empty of its own entity. It doesn't mean that it's empty of itself. This pot is empty of its own intrinsic or inherently existent nature, its own nature. It doesn't have, in fact, that doesn't exist, right? It's empty of that from the very beginning. Saying that and saying that it is at the same time that it is empty of true existence, it is empty of this entity. Some people are claiming that to be other emptiness or shentong, where that is not shentong, that is actually rangtong. Louise, what are you thinking?
This is Chirimantra's way of trying. Okay, if the pot was empty, then the person would be empty because they are both in the same karmic seeds. Is this the Chirimantra way of explaining it with this?
So I think we've gone a little bit beyond Chittamatra here, although that was Jason. So Jimpa's note 491 at this point, where does that come? That comes just at the end of that paragraph. You see the 491. So Jimpa said, Tsongkhapa is criticizing here Tibetan Madhyamikas who interpret intrinsic emptiness, or rangtong, right? Intrinsic emptiness, self-emptiness. He's criticizing those Madhyamikas who interpret intrinsic emptiness to mean that things are empty of themselves. In other words, a vase is empty of a vase. Bumpa, bumpe, tongba. Bumpa, bumpe, tongba. There are two ways in which one could make sense of vase being empty of vase. Okay, we just talked about that a second ago. This is the same thing. In the sense of not being a vase, which doesn't make any sense. A vase is empty of a vase, being a vase. Then, it doesn't make any sense. or in the locative sense of there being no vase in a vase. Since it cannot be meant in the second locative sense, it will have to be the first sense, that a vase is empty of a vase. So what does that mean? But to assert that a vase is not a vase would violate all norms of everyday convention, right? Doesn't make sense. Furthermore, such a characterization of intrinsic emptiness would leave our habitual innate grasping at intrinsic existence of things unchallenged and unscathed. Okay, so what's he talking about here? So it's incorrect for some people like Drolpopa and others who hold this Shentong or some in this case, not talking about others, it's talking about people who purport to be Madhyamikas, but have the wrong view of this. It is totally incorrect to assert that a vase being empty of true existence, but not being empty of itself, or you could put it opposite, a vase being empty of itself, a vase not being empty of itself, but being empty of true existence, constitutes extrinsic emptiness. In other words, it's empty of something other than the vase. So it would be Shentong. So that's Madhyamikas who understand it that way have gotten it wrong. What do you think? Have you gotten it wrong? Have I gotten it wrong? Is it making any sense? Mr. Shankar.
I'm still trying to figure out this thing about the second way of interpreting it, the locative sense of there being no vase in a vase, right? So, I mean, I can see why the first one is just absurd. I don't understand why it cannot mean the second, the locative sense.
Well,
what does locative mean here?
Yeah, so here, let me read what he's saying. He's saying, Tsong Khapa is critiquing here Tibetan Madhyamikas, not all Tibetan Madhyamikas, but some who have a wrong idea, who interpret Rangtong in the wrong way. They interpret intrinsic emptiness, which is what Lama Tsong Khapa says Chandrakirti is heralding, right? This is the correct emptiness, that phenomena are empty of their own entity. If you were to take that they're empty of themselves, or when you say themselves, whether you mean that their own entity, that's the crucial point here. So Khapa is critiquing here Tibetan Madhyamikas, certain subgroup, who misinterpret intrinsic emptiness to mean that things are empty of themselves. For example, a vase is empty of a vase. There are two ways in which one could make sense of a vase being empty of vase. In the sense of not being a vase. So a vase is not a vase. Or in the locative sense of there being no vase in a vase. Since it cannot be meant in the second locative sense. So almost you're anticipating is going to say the opposite. Since it cannot be meant in the second locative sense, it must be in the first sense that a vase is not a vase. But to assert that a vase is not a vase would violate all norms of everyday convention. Furthermore, such a characterization of intrinsic emptiness would leave our habitual innate grasping at intrinsic existence of things as unchallenged and unscathed. Okay,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
So my qualm is the basic assumption here that the locative sense of there being no vase in a vase. Why is that? I mean, everything else follows. I get that, and I understand the what follows to be absurd. Okay, but what I don't understand is why that statement is true. First, the basis of all of the following conclusions: that the locative sense of there being no vase in a vase.
Well, what if they're talking about the fact that you're imputing the label onto this thing, and then when you look for that within the thing, you can't find it within the parts?
Yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it, but I don't know if that's the right interpretation or not.
So here, this is not talking about the correct view, right? This is not talking about the correct Madhyamaka view. He's saying that for this subgroup of Madhyamikas who misinterpret wrong tone to mean that things are empty of themselves, they misinterpret the meaning of that. The actual meaning should be, if they're empty of themselves, wrong tone, it means they are empty of their own entity, of their own intrinsic entity, of their own true existence. That is, phenomena are empty of a vase is empty of a truly existent vase or an inherently existent vase. That would be the right way that Madhyamika would explain that. But here they're taking it on certain Madhyamikas in Tibet took it in the wrong way to mean things that are empty of themselves, not empty of their own entity.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So what you're saying is
Khapa could have made it much clearer had he added that.
Right.
So
what you're saying is there's a correct way of
interpreting wrong
it, and there's an incorrect way, and it can't. What these people are saying can't be the second one, which is the correct way, because we already know they're incorrect. So it must be the other. Okay, got it. Seems like a little circuitous. I mean,
I'm not sure you're close. So the correct way would be that a vase is empty of the entity of a vase, its own entity, rang tong. So rangi ngo tongba. Here it just says rang tong. So that could be misinterpreted in many ways. So one way is that a vase is empty of a vase. So what does that mean? There are two ways in which one could make sense of a vase being empty of a vase. So this is wrong. Both cases are wrong, right?
Oh, okay.
You could take it in the sense of a sense of not being a vase, that a vase is not a vase, does not exist as a vase. That's completely wrong. Or in the locative sense of there being no vase in a vase. Both of these are bonkers. What it actually means is that it's empty of its own entity, its own truly existent entity. Here it's just talking about on a very gross level. A vase is empty of a vase.
Okay, I'm back to square one then, because I'm still don't understand why it's wrong to say that, why it's wrong to interpret this to say that there isn't a vase in the vase. Why is that?
Because there is a vase in the vase. There is a conventionally existent vase in the vase, right?
No, I mean, that's the first thing we're talking. The first one is a vase, right? So
Right.
that we already, if you say the vase is not a vase, then that's absurd. I get that. The second question is, but kind of like what Sean was saying, why are we saying they're incorrect? Because they could be saying, well, you won't find a vase in the vase. That could be the locative sense of a locative business.
Here it says, in the sense of not being a vase, or in the locative sense of there being no vase in a vase.
Right.
It cannot be meant in the second locative sense that there is no vase in a vase. There is a vase in a vase.
Is there?
And also there is.
I mean, why do no? Wait. Why do
a vase is empty of a vase? No, One could make, there are two ways in which one could make sense of a vase being empty of vase. So that's when we talk about rang tong. So you replace rang with vase, and tong is empty. So empty of vase. So what does that mean? A vase is empty of vase. Bumpa, bumpe, tongba. In the note there, you can see the Tibetan. There are two ways in which you could make sense of a vase. So that particular interpretation is not the correct interpretation of rangtong. So the rangtong of a vase doesn't mean bumpa, bumpe, tongba. It means bumpe ngoo, bumpa, bumpe ngoo tongba. It means a vase is empty of a vase's intrinsic identity. Paul, what are your thoughts about this? Is that making sense to you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just he's basically saying, if I understand it correctly, that that he's redefining Rangdong, right? So empty of, as you say, self-empty or empty of an own nature is what we're talking about, empty of an intrinsic nature, right? And they're saying, no, that means nihilism. They're saying, oh, it must be other empty, which is some sort of, crypto Vedanta, that like it's empty of everything except what it really is.
That could enter into this. Yeah. So let's go back. So this is note 491. So it's at the end of this statement that said, this then is the intended meaning of the statement. So I think we felt that Venerable Jones' translation was better here. So she had translated this as, this then is also the intended meaning of the statement that all phenomena are empty of their own entity. See how it's saying, it doesn't say that they're empty of themselves, they're empty of themselves entity, their own entity. Themselves, apostrophe, yes, themselves. Okay, so that's clear. Therefore, it is not at all suitable to say, as some Tibetan Madhyamikas had said in the past, that a pot being empty of pot, but a pot not being empty of pot, which they think should be rangtong, but being empty of true existence is the emptiness of other, as though true existence is something other than the pot. It's completely bonkers. What do you think, Nadine? You hadn't heard bonkers before. When I said it the first time, I think you were laughing. Is that in the German vocabulary?
No, never heard. I don't know what it means.
It's crazy, completely like you drank too much beer or something like that. Making up arguments. So therefore, it is not at all suitable to say, and the context here means, as some Tibetan Madhyamikas incorrectly said, that a pot not being empty of pot, which is their misinterpretation, meaning rangtong, but being empty of true existence, which is something different than the pot, would be the emptiness of other, would be shentong. It's completely correct. But a pot being empty of pot is the emptiness of self. They're saying that rangtong means pot is empty of pot. It's not. Pot is empty of being the entity, the inherently existent entity of pot. Is that coming around slowly? Stephen, is it coming? Marinating?
Yeah, it is. And thank you for going over it, Venerable George. And I'm just thinking too, a pot empty of pot, it makes me think that might be what Chittamatra would say, in the sense that a pot is empty of its substance of a pot. Whereas they would say it's actually the pot doesn't have its own substance.
You can play with that. If it gets down to saying the same thing, that the Chittamatras usually interpreted that the pot and the consciousness that apprehends the pot. How many consciousnesses of the 6 consciousnesses, how many consciousnesses can apprehend the pot, Louise?
Depends. Are you holding it, looking at it, smelling
Well,
it, tasting it? You know,
I'm
mental
asking,
limit.
can eye consciousness apprehend a pot?
Sure.
Can ear consciousness apprehend a pot?
If you drop it, maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Squeeze it, it might make some sound. Generally, yeah, if you clink it like a bell, yeah, because usually sound is considered to be of a different continuum than the other
Okay.
objects, right? It has its own continuum. So ear possibly. Can you smell a pot?
Not if it's made right.
Well, you
You
can.
know, if the
If
mud
you've
is
been on an
baked well
Indian
enough.
train and you've gotten the little clay pots for tea that were freshly, they have a bad odor. Yeah, you can smell a pot. Can you taste a pot? You know, you
Not
might say that if it's well enameled, you don't taste anything, but you can taste. There is some taste to a pot. And tactile, certainly tactile. You can hold it and, feel it and everything. And the mental consciousness can also apprehend pot as a result of those 5 senses apprehending pot. Okay, so therefore it is totally incorrect to assert that a vase being empty of true existence, but not being empty of itself, constitutes extrinsic emptiness, and that a vase being empty of the vase itself constitutes intrinsic emptiness. I think Venerable Jones' translation is more accurate. What do you think, Nadine? You've been patiently holding your iconic hand.
Yeah, what we just learned, there are 2 ways of interpreting Rangtong. One is wrong and one is right, correct? Or are both wrong?
There are many ways of interpreting Rangtong.
Yes.
One of them is right. Let's say if there's a multiplicity. So here we're talking about certain interpretation by Tibetans who were Madhyamikas. They weren't, they weren't Chittamatras or Svatantra. Well, they might have been Svatantrikas, but they could have even purported to be Prasangikas and misinterpreting that Rangtong doesn't mean Rangi Ngo Tongba, that is emptied of its own entity or devoid of its own entity, intrinsically existent entity. That's the meaning of emptiness. When we say emptiness, we mean Rangtong. This idea of Rangtong and Shentong came about when people misinterpreted what emptiness meant. Emptiness means being devoid, being empty. The vase is empty of an inherently existent vase. It was never there from the beginning. There was never an inherently existent vase, but it always appears that way, but it's actually empty of that. Once you've had that realization, and when you see things outside as appearing to be inherently existent, you can utilize the illusion-like meditation on emptiness or the dream-like meditation on emptiness. And all these things, they appear one way, but they are actually empty of that. So the correct meaning of Rangtong is Rangi Ngo Tongba. So to say that the meaning of Rangtong is, let's say the meaning of the emptiness of a vase is that a vase is empty of being a vase, that's not right in whatever way interprets it. There are other interpretations of Rangtong that are also wrong, but here it's just talking about those particular ones. Okay, how are we feeling? KT, is making sense?
Oh, getting clearer.
Okay.
Distinguishing
I
what
think
really
I think
is
I got it
intrinsic.
now.
We're trying to really hone what we mean by intrinsic is where I'm going with this, like honing the
Yeah.
definition of intrinsic essence, a
So
distinct
intrinsic or inherent. So
or
when we talk about the Tibetan word rangshin, which generally is one of the main translations of svabhava, right? The Sanskrit word svabhava. Is that right, Paul? Okay. So when we talk about nature, it has we're talking about usually what it means, this svabhava means some kind of imagined nature that's there, something existing from its own side or being truly existent, actually existing the way that it appears. That kind of rangshin is what we're talking about here. And the theoretical synonyms of that, I say theoretical synonyms because that rangshin doesn't exist. That kind of findable essence or truly existent essence, that doesn't exist. So but there are some hypothetical synonyms of it. To be synonyms, two things have to exist. That's why we say hypothetical synonyms, right? So one of them would be, when we say existing by its own true nature, existing by its intrinsic characteristics, in existing inherently, all of these various things mean the same thing, right? For the people who propound those different labels, they sometimes, to those tenets, they think they mean different things. The Svatantrikas think, well, let me ask you, yeah. So Rachel, for the Svatantrikas, is inherent existence the same as true existence? Do they mean the same thing? Are they hypothetical synonyms for Svatantrika?
This is a challenging one, Venerable George, for me, because true existence was already, I thought, by Svatantrika's standards, already eliminated, but inherent existence has not been. So
right. So therefore, they wouldn't be synonyms for Svatantrika, right? They wouldn't be theoretical synonyms because they mean different things. For them, emptiness means the emptiness of true existence. It doesn't mean the emptiness of inherent existence or intrinsic existence. You still there? Yeah. So for them, they are not theoretical synonyms, but for Prasangika, all of these variations are, well, the group of, I don't know how many there are, 12 or 13 or something, theoretical, hypothetical synonyms of true existence. All of them have the same meaning. Okay, let's read a little bit further here. For if the vase were empty of itself, I'm reading Jimpa's translation again, the vase would not exist in a vase. And if something, say for instance, a vase, does not exist in itself, that's leading on from the first thing. If a vase were empty of itself, the vase would not exist as a vase. It would not exist in a vase. And if something, say a vase, does not exist in itself, since it cannot exist in any other thing either, this implies that the vase does not exist at all. This will be equally true of all other things as well, not just a vase. And so the person uttering such statements also would not exist. This renders the entire discourse about emptiness, something being empty of this but not of that, totally impossible. Okay. So if we had time, we could debate all of these things. There's some subtle things here. Yeah, so I think, let me just read before we take a break. I think that's what Louise is going to remind me. Before we take a break, let me just read a little of this next paragraph to make a transition. Now, some people assert this form of emptiness, a thing being empty of itself. That's wrong, right? It's empty of, not being empty of itself, it's being empty of its own intrinsic existence or inherent existence. Some people assert that this form of emptiness, a thing being empty of itself, to be a perfect view, while others hold it to be a nihilistic emptiness. Nihilistic emptiness. Both of these remain, however, outside the true understanding of dependent origination, free from the extremes of eternalism, permanence, however you want to say, and nihilism, which has been established by the conqueror. And Jimpa translates it, interprets that here as Nagarjuna and his spiritual heir, Aryadeva, not just once, but repeatedly. Venerable Joan translates it as the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas, meaning the conqueror Buddha and his spiritual sons, the Bodhisattvas. But here, I think probably Jimpa has it correct. So what does that mean? We'll what does that mean? Think about it. We'll do after break. So let's take a little break. Get yourself some coffee. I'll leave my
The person uttering.
No. You don't. Please don't. Okay, so we're recording again. We just took a little break. So I just read this next paragraph that said, now some people assert this form of emptiness in the sense of a thing being of itself, like bumpe bumpa tongba, or bumpa bumpe tongba, that a vase is empty of a vase. And when we in English, that sounds correct, right? A vase is empty. I mean, correct. A correct. It's not necessarily philosophically correct, but that's a correct way of saying the words, right? Vase is empty of a vase, but it's actually in Tibetan. It says bumpa bumpe tokpa with an instrumental particle there. A vase is empty by a vase. What do you think, Paul? Have you ever heard that explained? Why is that? You would think it would be a genitive particle, like in English. A vase is empty of a vase.
I think it's just a legacy of nominalizing the sentence because dong is a verb that takes its qualifier marked with the third case, with the instrumental case. So, for example, if you say, instead of, you can say dong to be empty, but you could say gang to be full, right? So you could say Buddha fields are full of bodhisattvas, and you would use bodhisattva in the third case, right? If you were to take it instrumentally, then you'd say Buddha fields are filled by bodhisattvas. And then it's like, what are they filling the Buddha field with? Chocolate ice cream or something, right? It's just that what qualifies the verb for verbs of containment and absence is marked in the instrumental case. And if you don't know that in Tibetan, you can mistranslate it.
Okay, so I couldn't follow that. I'll have to think of Geshe Darge many years ago when I asked him personally, and after class in Dharamsala, he said that through the translator, of course, that when you talk about whether it be in the Sanskrit or in the Tibetan, when you talk about things being emptied of something, that if there was a genitive particle there, if it was bumpa bumpe dongba with a genitive particle there, that would mean that it has been emptied of something which could exist there. and you can take it out, like a cup is empty of yogurt when if the yogurt can be taken out. But when you're not talking about something that can be physically separated from that thing, like its intrinsic the appearance of its intrinsic nature, or its emptiness, that can't be separated from the object. They're one entity, right? The object and its emptiness are the same entity. When you talk about that, you have to use the instrumental case. So I don't know if that fits with your grammarian explanation. I'll let you and I think about that and discuss it sometime. Okay, so now some people assert that this form of emptiness, that a thing being empty of itself, to be a perfect view, which is puba. Here's a new word for Rachel's dictionary. Where did Rachel? Not Rachel. Nadine. Did Nadine disappear? Oh, Nadine is there, yeah. Have you heard puba? Okay, that means bunkers. It means it's lightweight. Okay, so some people assert this form of emptiness, that a thing being empty of itself, is a perfect view. That's completely wrong. While others hold it to be a nihilistic emptiness, a thing being empty of itself. Both of these remain, however, outside the true understanding of dependent origination, free from the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, which has been established by Nagarjuna and Aryadeva. So Venerable Joan translated that. Also, both those who say that such emptiness is correct, as Jimpa said, perfect view. She just translates it as correct. Both those who say that such emptiness is correct, this vase being empty of vase, and others who assert it to be a nihilistic emptiness, are ostracized from the fact, I don't know, I think, how does Chimpa say that? Outside, she's ostracized. So it says outside the correct view, sort of like, are ostracized from the fact that the conquerors and the conqueror's children, she just translates it as though it's the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas. It actually means Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, proved it more than once to be dependent arising, free from the extremes of permanence and annihilation. In particular, asserting a nihilistic emptiness through saying all conventional truths are necessarily settled to be empty of themselves. All conventional truths are necessarily posited or settled to be empty of themselves, is just not suitable, because none of the four proponents of tenets, four Buddhist tenet schools, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika, none of the four, through having understood that view to be a view of annihilation, generated in their continua. Okay, what is this saying? So let's read further what Jimpa said. He said, which has been established by the conqueror Nagarjuna and his spiritual heir Aryadeva, not just once, but repeatedly. In particular, those who assert that the entire reality of conventional truths must be established as empty of themselves, right? We said, we've already gone over that's not correct. They're not empty of themselves. They're empty of their own nature, their own inherent nature, or emptied by their own inherent nature. Those who assert the entire reality of conventional truths must be established as empty of themselves, and assert this form of emptiness to constitute a nihilistic emptiness, are utterly incorrect. So he's saying they're the same people, and they assert this form of emptiness to constitute nihilistic emptiness are utterly incorrect. The notion of emptiness generally entails that a given entity, okay, the idea of emptiness generally involves talking about a particular entity, the basis of negation. So what would be the basis of negation? Is David here? David, what would be the basis of negation in the emptiness of a vase?
The shape of the vase itself,
Yeah. So from Prasangika point of view, the basis of negation would be the conventionally existent vase, right? Something that
yes.
doesn't exist inherently. And that it is, well, so the notion of emptiness generally entails that a given entity, the basis of negation, let's say the conventionally existent vase, is demonstrated to not exist in a manner that is being negated or is shown to be empty of what is to be negated. So that vase does not exist truly or inherently, or that vase is shown to be empty of true existence, empty of inherent existence. This much is the same for all forms of emptiness. That's generally what we mean when we talk about emptiness. It is, however, the emptiness of phenomena in the sense of being devoid of existing by virtue of intrinsic characteristic that constitutes the true meaning of things being empty of their own essence. So it is, or let's say, let's read how Joan reads that sentence. Thus, while being the basis of negation, not existing in the entity of the object of negation, and that basis being empty also of the way of being empty of the object of negation are similar. I think Chimpas translates a little more easily. Phenomena being empty of establishment by way of their own character is the meaning of being empty by way of their own entity. Okay, so what does that mean? When we said for Prasangika, the actual meaning of vase being empty is not that vase is empty of a vase. It is that vase is empty of being, a vase is empty of true existence, of its own true existence, of its own inherent existence, of it's empty of its own inherently existent entity that appears to us, that the vase is inherently existent. That's the meaning. So Chimpa's, I think, a little easier to understand here. The notion of emptiness generally entails that a given entity, such as the basis of negation, is demonstrated not exist in a manner that is negated or shown to be empty of what is to be negated. So we just went over that. This much is the same for all forms of emptiness. So whether you're talking about the emptiness of true existence or the emptiness of form and form realizing consciousness to be different substances or other kinds of meanings of emptiness, they all follow the same pattern, that the basis of negation is demonstrated, such as, let's say, the person is demonstrated to not exist truly or inherently, and so forth and so on. It is, however, the emptiness of phenomena in the sense, that much is the same for all emptiness. It is, however, the emptiness of phenomena in the sense of being devoid of existing by virtue of intrinsic character that constitutes the true meaning of things being empty of their own essence. Or flip it around, the real meaning of being empty of their own entity means that phenomena are devoid by virtue of, or devoid of intrinsic characteristic or inherent existence. That's the actual meaning of Rangtong. So Rangtong means Rangi Tong, Rangi Ngo Tongwa, and the Ngo means inherent, some kind of inherent existence. How are we doing? Making sense? Jeremy, is it making sense in the southern continent, in the southern hemisphere?
I'm quite confused, George. Sorry.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, this is as you can see, many of our more, who've followed this course for a couple of years are also trying to get what's being said here. So don't worry. Let's continue a little. All other forms of emptiness do not constitute the emptiness of things' own essence. So emptiness of form and form realizing, consciousness being different substances, that is not the meaning of emptiness of things, own entity. As long as here is the reason. As long as the impact of having established emptiness of the first type, means intrinsic existence, intrinsic emptiness, rangtong, right? As long as the impact of having established emptiness of the first type by means of a valid cognition remains undiminished, there is no possibility at all during such a period for any reification of that basis to arise through grasping at true existence owing to any kind of philosophical reflection. It sounds complicated, right? It's very, very simple. It says, here's the reason. If you have established emptiness, right? That means with reasoning, right? With reasoning consciousness, we call it, ultimate analysis, trying to find the thing. And you've discovered that there is no findable, truly existent vase, in the vase, outside of the vase, both in and out or whatever. Once you've established that by valid cognition, and in the case of logic, what would that valid cognition be? Would that be eye consciousness or ear consciousness, Paul, or what?
I'm sorry, say that again, Venerable George.
The valid cognition that establishes emptiness.
Yep. That would be a mental direct perception, right? I mean, it would be.
Well, it wouldn't have to be a direct perception. Here we're just saying it establishes it. So it could mean a conceptual understanding of it.
Sure, sort of inferential. Yeah.
But the first realization will have to be conceptual, and that comes about through a valid cognition, which is a reasoning consciousness.
Right.
It's not, although eye consciousness has valid perception, and ear has valid perception, they're not involved in establishing.
Inferential valid cognition or valid inference, right?
Right. So here's the reason. As long as the impact of having established emptiness by means of a valid cognition remains undiminished, as long as you are either in that meditative session conceptually or directly realizing emptiness, and that realization has not diminished. So that means once you get up from that meditation, that will start to diminish. But as long as it's undiminished, there is no possibility at all during such a period for any reification of that basis to arise through grasping at true existence owing to any kind of philosophical reflection. So a lot of complicated words linked together. So that means there is no kind of, what's the other word we use for elaboration. There's, that your mind is thinking, well, one part of your mind is thinking, well, maybe it exists, maybe it really exists, maybe it truly exists, maybe it inherently exists. There's no, while you're actually involved in having established emptiness, either conceptually or directly, while you're in that meditative session, and that understanding is there, no other thoughts can interfere with that, that are grasping to true existence, because you've actually are centered on this realization of emptiness. Continuing with Jimpa's translation. With respect to those other types of emptiness, however, say the emptiness of form and form realizing consciousness being different substances, right? That's another kind of emptiness, but it's explained here as that's not the Prasangika view of emptiness. That's some other kind of emptiness. With respect to those other types of emptiness, however, though one may have established them through valid cognition, and their impact remains undiminished, can you establish that form and form realizing consciousness are different substances, are devoid of being different substances with a valid cognition? Stephen?
I can't think of a way of doing that, Venerable George. We've talked about that in the past, but it just doesn't seem to make sense.
Right, that because from the Prasangika point of view, they are different substances, right? They do exist. There is an external reality that exists separate from the subjective apprehension of that reality. So he must be talking about some of the other emptinesses, like say, for instance, from the Vaibhashika or some Sautrantikas, that a person is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, right? Can that be established with valid cognition? What do you think, Nadine?
Yes, I think it can, because it is in line with reality.
That's what Prasangika would say, the gross selflessness of persons. And that is true, that a person is empty of being a self-supporting, substantially existent person. So that could be established through valid cognition. And however, though one may have established, let's say, the selflessness, the gross selflessness of persons through valid cognition, and the strength of that is undiminished, the impact of that, the realization is undiminished. You haven't fallen asleep or left meditation. There is nothing to preclude during the same period reifying things as truly existent or as real due to philosophical speculation. So what does that mean? That in that session, even though you've realized the person is empty of self-supporting, substantially existent person, your mind still might be grasping at that or at other entities as being truly existent or inherently existent. So Jimpa's note 493, this is the reason why I provided those two PDFs that I hope you have access to, one by Robert Thurman and one by Jeffrey Hopkins, both of them translating the same passage in Lekshe Ningpo and Lama Tsongkhapa's one of his other major texts on emptiness, Essence of Eloquence of the Definitive and Interpretable Meaning of the Sutras. This paragraph this is note 493 in Jimpa's book. This paragraph appears almost verbatim in one of Tsongkhapa's earlier works, the Lekshe Ningpo, Essence of True Eloquence. For an English translation of the relevant section from the Essence, see Thurman's edition, 1984 edition, page 357. So that is extracted in the document that you have that says by Thurman, but we also have access to Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of the same Tibetan passage. And so I suggested that you read the two together and see if one can illuminate the other. I think generally Jeffrey's makes Thurman's a little more clear. Sometimes Thurman has more notes in his. So anyway, Jipa's note says, for an English translation, see Thurman. Tsongkhapa is presenting here what he understands to be a key criterion for whether a particular view of emptiness constitutes the correct intrinsic emptiness, or rangtong, view of Nagarjuna. As Nagarjuna says that the actual Dongpani, actual shunyata, is a self shunyata, is rangi ngo tongpa. If despite having realized a particular understanding of emptiness means not exactly the correct view, like saying that the person is empty of being a self-supporting, substantially existent person. If having realized, so even have you realized a particular sense of emptiness, that's not the correct Prasangika view of emptiness. Despite having realized a particular emptiness, understanding of emptiness, which would be a correct one, there remains room for grasping at some kind of objective existence. One has not arrived at the final understanding of emptiness. So to use as the example that I'm giving here is if you've realized that the person is empty of being a self-supporting, substantially existent person, that doesn't mean that you've gotten to the end point of the realization of emptiness from the Prasangika point of view at all. Once one has arrived at the final understanding of emptiness, Tsongkhapa suggests there will be no ground left for any temptation to grasp or reify, superimpose, especially due to philosophical reflection, thinking, things that you've heard or just try to analyze incorrectly, while the impact of the realization lasts. This suggestion echoes Nagarjuna's point in verse 52 of his, what is it called, Chupa, 60 stanzas of reasoning, and also stanza 58, that as long as one's mind remained tied to an objectifiable locus. Oh, I hate these things. Objectifiable locus. What does that mean, Paul?
I just think it means so long as it remains tied to something that is an inherent basis, I think.
Viable locus.
Yeah.
So I think locus,
or a reference.
usually he says she, or some basis. Usually when we talk about the basis of the negation, we talk about basis, objectifiable locus. So as long as one's mind remains tied to something that one conceives to be truly existent, there is always an opening for afflictions to arise. So that's something we've talked about before in many different ways. If you've realized from the Hinayana point of view the selflessness of persons, which let's say the Vaibhashika would consider to be the subtle selflessness of persons, that a person is empty of being a self-supporting, substantially existent person, right? And that is true, right? That's a correct realization. That's something one can realize. They would say that realization then, that realization of emptiness then has, that's the true path, and that has caused the cessation, or that can cause the cessation of all of the afflictions. That realizing the person is not self-supporting, substantially existent, that can eliminate all of the afflictions. And there are a lot of afflictions that do arise from that grasping, or as a grasping to the person as being permanent. When you realize that the person is impermanent, there's a lot of afflictions that could have arisen when you were grasping to things to be permanent. You know, when you get angry, you have to be reminded this will change, right? If you're grasping to things of being permanent, that can give rise to various afflictions. Those, once you've realized that the person is impermanent, those afflictions that arose from grasping it to be permanent are eliminated, right? When you've realized that the person is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, the delusions or afflictions that arise because of that are reduced. But there's still afflictions, subtle afflictions, that exist from grasping the person to be inherently existent. That we had talked about in various places in the text before. Does that sound familiar, KT? You've heard that before? Rachel, what do you think? No. I saw a sigh there.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just like one of the things you just said was that it's seen as the subtle selflessness of person from the Hinayana point of view.
Right.
But what you didn't say was that that's not the subtle point of view from the Madhyamaka
Good, yeah. Make it
or
more
the Prasangika.
Prasangika point of view. That is true, but that's the gross selflessness of persons. The subtle selflessness of persons is the person being empty of inherent existence. But for the Vaibhashikas, the subtle selflessness of persons is this emptiness of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, whereas the gross selflessness of persons is what, Rachel?
For the Hinayana point of view, I'm sorry, I won't be accurate.
Who knows? Don knows. Yeah.
Pardon?
For the Vaibhashika, what's the gross selflessness of persons?
I think a permanent partner's independent person.
Yes. Yeah, there we go. So for them, that's the gross selflessness of persons, and that will not, just realizing that won't lead to liberation, generally, Vaibhashika says. But you could, if you understand the person is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, that can lead to liberation. From Prasangika point of view, not only can it lead to liberation, it doesn't lead, well, coordinate with that, it doesn't lead to liberation because it doesn't act as an antidote to all of the afflictions. There are afflictions that arise through grasping to true existence. And that's why all of our actions, while we still have grasping to true existence, came from before class, when we were talking before class, all of those actions are contaminated. All of our actions that we do now, if we haven't realized emptiness directly, are contaminated actions. They're contaminated in the sense that the consciousness is grasping to phenomena as being inherently existent or truly existent. So even the virtuous actions that we do, great virtuous actions, such as I requested our classmate Sumash, he was visiting Lumbini last week, and I asked him to offer some light offerings. So he offered some light offerings at Lumbini and dedicated for the success of our Gompa Rapso class, in the same way that Nadine made offerings and prayers in Sri Lanka, various places for the success of our class. So we're getting some good juju from people. So all of those actions, they say Suvanj offering, light offering there, isn't that virtuous? KT? Isn't that virtuous action?
Yes, but we still have our innate grasping embedded, so it's virtuous, but it's kind of like, as you said, sort of the mix of the black and white karma. I mean, because we're still
That's different. That's different.
different. Oh, okay.
That's different. Black and white.
Oh.
Here, it sounds a little bit irritating to say that great virtuous action done with bodhicitta, or how do you say, artificial bodhicitta, credible merit created. To demean that by saying it's contaminated virtue sounds a little bit, demeaning. It is contaminated because the only place that can ripen, unless you dedicate it in a certain way, the only place that can ripen is within pleasurable experiences within cyclic existence. It can't become the cause of the bliss of liberation unless you dedicate it in a certain way for liberation or enlightenment. So that's why they're called contaminated actions. All of our actions now, everything we do all the time, are contaminated. And if we do virtuous actions, they're contaminated virtue. If we do negative actions, double whammy, they're negative and contaminated. So, okay. So before we finish, how are you feeling? Anyone have anything they'd like to get off their shoulders? Or get off their chest?
Is dedication not an action?
Yeah. Is dedication an action? Yeah, I think so.
Well, isn't that a perfect, if you do it correctly, isn't that the perfect virtue?
The dedication, if you, there are two kinds of dedication. There are many ways of dividing up dedication, but two ways you can say ordinary dedication and dedication within the emptiness of the three spheres, right? So ordinary dedication just means, due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha in order to lead every being into that very same state. That's ordinary. Trying to link up the action that you created, the karmic seed or the shikpa. Anyway, the continuation of that, trying to link it up with an eventual goal. So by your dedication, it's kind of a prayer. You're trying to cause that karma to ripen in that particular way. That's conventional dedication. But you can be grasping to the merits that you created, that you're dedicating, as being inherently existent. The goal you're dedicating to, enlightenment. Oh, that really exists. Grasping that way. And the act of dedication, the person dedicating, the action of dedication, all of these, you can grasp them to be truly existent. So if you meditate particularly after having done the conventional dedication, if you meditate in particular that the emptiness of these three spheres, let's say I usually divide it up this way: the merits, the goal dedicated to, and the act of dedication. But sometimes it's said that the person, the third thing, that the person who's doing the dedicating, if you meditate on the emptiness of those, that particular kind of dedication can't be so those merits that you dedicate in that way cannot be destroyed if you do it very, very deeply. They cannot be destroyed by instance of our anger or abandoning the Dharma or other certain kinds of actions that can destroy virtuous karma. The ordinary dedication, due to these merits, may I quickly become a Buddha in order to benefit sentient beings. dedicating only that way doesn't preserve the merits from being diminished by instance of anger and abandoning the Dharma and so forth. But both of them are ways to link that contaminated karma with the goal of liberation or enlightenment. If you dedicate to your own liberation or to the enlightenment of yourself for the benefit of sentient beings, those dedications can link those contaminated karmas in such a way that they will bring about that effect. Is that make sense? Sure. Okay. Okay. So Nadine, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Do I remember correctly that the only uncontaminated state of mind within the continuum of a sentient being is the meditative equipoise of an Arya being on emptiness meditation?
Yeah, those are, what did you say, of an ordinary sentient being?
No,
You mean?
of a sentient being, not
Of a-
ordinary.
Yeah.
No.
So a 10th level bodhisattva in post meditation, so that means they're no longer or let's say an Arya being on the pure bhumis in post meditation, have they not eliminated all of the afflictions?
Yes, they have.
So are any of their actions contaminated?
No, not
Okay.
contaminated.
So you were saying only the meditative equipoise.
Ah, I see.
So it
Yeah.
could include also post-meditation of those Arya beings because they have abandoned from the root all of the afflictions so that they will never come back. So the existence of an afflicted mind, grasping the true existence or inherent existence, is the defining characteristics of contaminated phenomena. So uncontaminated mind would include more than just the meditative equipoise on emptiness. Do you agree, Stephen?
Yes.
I was hoping for more. Okay. Okay. So any questions before we end? It was a good question, Nadine. Thank you for that. Okay, so this Thursday, April 3rd at 9:30 Pacific time, our brother Shanka is going to create some virtuous, although contaminated, hopefully a little bit uncontaminated virtue by becoming a Getzel. I assume you're just it's just going to have novice ordination. So another time you'll become a bhikshu sometime in the future with a High Lama in California. So if you wanted to try to pray beforehand, offer dedications for the success of his ordination, that would be highly appreciated. Okay, so let's dedicate our virtues, which were collection of merit and collection of wisdom, because we had some insights, even though it's maybe not technically collection of wisdom, usually arises with direct realization of emptiness. But even our better understanding of emptiness, we're creating something similar to a collection of wisdom. So let's dedicate these merits, which Louise will put up the prayers if you don't know. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very same state. That means the state of a Guru Buddha. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow in my mind and in the minds of other beings. And may that which has arisen already in my mind and the minds of others not diminish, but increase more and more. That's just, as stated like that, that's the famous prayer. But if we think as a dedication, thinking due to these merits, may that take place. And then long life prayer for the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings, through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, were the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. You are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings. While doing that, while striving in that way, you suddenly departed to peace, at which point I lost hope. I was deflated. I was bereft. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of mind generation, that means bodhicitta, of the offspring of the conquerors, that means the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. So here, this is talking about the power of the truth. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths. So that means that one could call on the power of the truth of the blessings of the three jewels, which are like immense, like an ocean. And one could call on the truth that bodhisattvas have developed, bodhicitta, and are working for the benefit of sentient beings. If one has realized that deeply and one calls upon that, one can use that to bring about various results. In this case, it's asking that due to these truths, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us. And then final dedication for all our spiritual friends. You who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, it means both compassion and love, illuminating spiritual friends, please, I make this request, live long and stable lives. You could say that it's not a request to them if they don't have the power to affect things. You're requesting. If you request me to live long, there's not much I can do other than eating well and seeing the doctor and so forth. So it can be, to the spiritual friends, may you have long and lasting lives and so forth. Okay, good to see you. I hope your teeth are not bruised by chewing these very tough bones. And a lot of tough things here. You have to remember Satrantaka, Svatvashika, Chittamatra, Svatantrika, all of these different things that Lama Tsongkhapa is referring to that is just, you're supposed to know, what he's saying. So I hope to see some of you on Monday. Paul, if you could give a call to John and say, come on, John, Monday.
I will do that.
And I think some of our other folks are still on other journeys. So hope to see you Monday, but certainly next Saturday here. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Be good. Don't get too
Thank you.
upset
Thank
with all
you,
the
Venerable
things
George.
going on in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.